I told you not to worry, didn't I? Arsenal are back to their free-flowing, free-scoring best, and this is part of what I hope is that run of wins I've been keen to emphasise has not been too far away for a while now. In today's video, we're going to analyse the West Ham United performance, but what we can take away from it on a more macro scale, talking about our fluid, revolving build-up and its continual evolution, the dynamics of our right-hand side with Ødegaard's returning influence, Timber's presence, and Bukayo Saka's ruthless, incessant and unerring quality. We're also going to chat a little bit about our left-hand side and how it varied in its composition to normal and how crucial that Rice and Calafiori relationship is within that. Welcome back to the Harvey Gratian YouTube channel. I'm so glad you found us or are joining us once again. And let's start with one of the things that I love most about this Arsenal team, and it's our flexibility in how we can approach games on the ball now with so many different potential templates. All full of rotations, but templates ranging from the really fluid build-up in terms of structure we saw against Sporting and in many points against West Ham, to things a bit more settled and fixed, like for example against Nottingham Forest. This was the blueprint, as we covered last video, against Nottingham Forest. Timber secured in that back three with Calafiori inverting into this hybrid role where he could either receive centrally, mostly deeper and outside of the block, or he could shuffle a bit wider to collect the ball outside of Forest's front line of four out of possession. Jorginho was a brilliant calm head in possession and often looked to position himself inside the Forest block, and in part this was to allow Ødegaard to make those wide, deeper swings to draw out a Nottingham Forest pivot player in midfield we see him about to make here, as well as allow Jurrien Timber to burst higher through the half space. And on the other side, Mikel Merino in that high left 8 was where he played mostly, but he was equally able to shift himself onto the sideline to receive, again encouraging this time Calafiori to burst higher through the half space. If things were a bit more settled against Nottingham Forest, against Sporting, that rulebook was dispensed with, seamlessly shifting between shapes, creating that fluid, revolving, in possession look and feel that we do so well. This brings us though to West Ham, which again possessed a different set of personnel on the pitch, meaning a slightly new and evolved template once again, but potentially the best template of them all. This was the base foundation that everything started to take off from for us. Raya splitting the centre-backs wide, starting in a pivot of Jorginho and Declan Rice, with again those pushers and dynamic strong-sided threats from our flanks, our fullbacks, Jurrien Timber and Riccardo Calafiori on the sides. But this passage I'm going to show you now at the start of the game shows just how improvisational and fluid things got for us yesterday. Here comes basically a whistle-stop tour of how we pulled apart this pretty poor, if we're being honest, West Ham press. Going back to that first image, Rice starts to move a bit higher, so Havertz drops in from the centre forward. Now, let me explain why this was so key. Rice was mostly our main pivot man next to Jorginho against West Ham, and of course, this leaves that higher left 8 zone that Merino occupied against Forest, or that one that Rice popped in a lot against Sporting Lisbon. It made it much freer in terms of who occupied that zone on Saturday, and from our build-up base in this image, it would be Kai Havertz that would start hovering around that area. But with the direction that this video is planning to take, it's important to bear in mind how well we made use of how open we left that zone for anyone to move into. So here we form this sort of quasi midfield three with Ødegaard pinning Paqueta so that Saliba can receive without pressure. We work it back round and you can see that stretchy base we often form with Calafiori and Ødegaard either side of Jorginho in the 6. Declan Rice now re-enters the picture, as does Jurrien Timber, who drops down. And we form this really fortified build-up image of this sort of 3-4 setup that we often create when we want to overload. As play continues, Kai probes on the edges once more, and Ødegaard makes that familiar swing into essentially a right-back berth, with us creating this very fluid midfield of here Rice in now the right centre-mid, and Calafiori in that flexible left 8 spot. This is the last shot I'm going to show you now, because I don't want to oversaturate you, but this is, as we form at the end of this passage, a sort of lopsided box midfield, with Calafiori in the pivot next to Jorginho, and Rice in that higher pocket, and you can see how this is sort of threatening to form form those diamond situations in midfield that we saw against Sporting Lisbon. But why were these movements so important for us on the day? Let's start with this final image. Well, actually, a similar shot, but half an hour into the game. We're going to start by working backwards from this image here though, because initially Jorginho had dropped in between the two centre-backs and we formed that midfield three with Calafiori and Ødegaard. But just 5 seconds later, we find ourselves in this setup again, with Calafiori really tight next to Jorginho, and here you can see the array of angles that Calafiori can play at, receiving and playing in field, giving us that pivot to pivot connection, which is a really nice additive, I think, for this Arsenal side. And with Ødegaard having pinned Souček high here, Jorginho has space to move into. There was a real freedom to Martin Ødegaard's movements, and there has been since he has returned to the team. And we struck a great balance with that, I thought, on Saturday. I'm going to show you guys now a really long passage in the build-up to Leandro Trossard and our second goal that not only exemplifies the benefits of having and allowing Ødegaard to float across to the centre and across to the left-hand side, but especially when we are talking about how we left that left slot free to move into and how this ties into a real collective sense of balance on the pitch. This is a really cool and exciting bit of analysis that I'm going to share with you. So let's go. We start with things as you would expect when progressing into the final third, showing how we can seesaw from side to side with our fullbacks, with Calafiori inside here and Timber just more conservatively tucking into that back three. But on the left of your screen right now, you'll see Ødegaard just motioning to Kai Havertz to rotate, a seemingly insignificant movement, but one that kickstarts a chain reaction because it gives Ødegaard enough room to separate himself from Kilman, the centre-back, who was originally tracking Kai Havertz, remember, and connect us then, Ødegaard, with Calafiori in the centre and work it back round to Leandro Trossard. Firstly, you can see how we've divided those high left pocket duties really well in the game, with Calafiori here offering that burst through the half space. And you can see the potential this dynamic creates for cutbacks with Ødegaard. And you've also got Rice protecting us from the counter-attack slightly lower. Obviously though, you don't want to overburden Calafiori with these big shuttles forward, and that's where his relationship with Declan Rice is so crucial. And very successful, because Declan Rice gave us so much thrust, didn't he, on Saturday in these positions, in the carrying us up the pitch. And I think it's more than fair to say, if Declan Rice isn't playing in the lone six for us, and it's, for example, Partey or Jorginho that he's playing alongside, then Calafiori is absolutely vital for platforming Declan Rice in the right way. But I digress. Back to the build-up for Trossard's goal, because now Ødegaard floats from the central pocket to the left-hand side, with Rice filling in at left back. And these same side overloads were really potent against Sporting Lisbon. And here we're squeezing with Gabriel in the left centre-back, trying to work an angle for Calafiori or Trossard off the last line, but decide to work it back round to the right-hand side, where, remember, Havertz has now become that Saka support, not Ødegaard. And as Saka receives it, Havertz underlaps and drags both Crescencio Somerville and Paqueta into the back line. Ødegaard has manoeuvred his way back across to the right hand side, and West Ham have simply just not read this rotation at all. Look how much time and space is on the edge of the box for Martin Ødegaard now, and our right hand sided play is simply just about revolving now, interchanging until someone gets into this kind of space. And in this situation, we are so deadly. Ødegaard, as he does so often, just lifts it over the top into Saka. Havertz is now that true centre forward, and Trossard taps home. It's vintage Arsenal. This brings me though nicely transitioning from the left hand side to the right hand side, to our dynamics on the right, which have always been so effective and our most effective part of the pitch to progress and to be aggressive and threatening from, but could possibly be the best they have ever been right now. And I still think we could arguably improve this more, by the way. But let's look at why our right hand side was ticking once again against West Ham. And spoiler, this links nicely into a video I'm working on Jurrien Timber, and why he could just be Arsenal's most underrated player. But how comfortable Timber is in multiple zones, as well as his dynamic support for Bukayo Saka, means that it's not always Martin Ødegaard, the one directly sitting next to Saka. And now this positioning of Ødegaard next to Saka is by no means a bad thing, it's the opposite if anything, but enabling Ødegaard to move into these types of positions deeper, to receive and to help knit our build-up together. It's much more effective when he's rotating with a guy from right centre-back who's super able in these central spaces, or someone who can drive through the half space when Ødegaard swings lower like this. And in this vein, you get this type of look much more often with our right-hand side now, with Timber more set in the high pocket before those sort of rotations and dynamic interchanges start to occur, and Ødegaard measuring from lower. And then when you start to add in maybe Havertz drifting across and joining from the centre forward on occasion, or our number 6 against West Ham, Jorginho, forming that box on the right-hand side. In these situations, when that right-hand side can start revolving, rotating, get Saka on the inside, and as we continue to focus on playing those same-sided patterns of play, that opposition back line, if you just watch them across the whole game when we're trying to overload and play same side on the right hand side, that opposition back line is having to constantly adjust itself so often. And that is when little gaps open up for Timber to dart into, to link and be associative with guys like Bukayo Saka who can drive or receive him behind or in central spaces. Then Ødegaard becomes that knitter and string puller. A balance that I think is really, really nice. And this Timber praise, as I'm going to flesh out a bit in my next video, is by no means shade on Benjamin White, who is a completely different type, an effective type of hybrid right back. White is a quarterback that wants to see play happen in front of him and then utilise his passing range or those arcing overlapping runs then. And I think when White finds himself in those inside roles, things do feel a bit more functional, whereas Timber is genuinely additive in these positions through his quick carries, link up, dynamism in the pockets. And like I said, I'm working on a video for Timber, but also for Bukayo Saka too, because I want to dedicate a proper in-depth video on Bukayo Saka, who is a player now not only operating in best in the league conversations, but best in the world conversations. We should never take for granted what Saka is doing week in, week out. And we need to shower him in the praise that he deserves, because with Ødegaard returning, making us tick with those strong-sided, fluid, dynamic fullbacks I've been banging on about, I do not want to risk in wanting to show you guys maybe what you've missed. I do not want to miss ignoring the most obvious, the most ever-present, the constant currency of this Arsenal team, which is Bukayo Saka. So, in summary, I really hope you've enjoyed my analysis of Arsenal's 5-2 win away at West Ham. Like I said, I've got videos in the works, and I simply cannot thank you guys enough for how lovely the feedback or the comments are on each and every video. You're the only reason that I've decided to really go for this whole YouTube gig. You are the reason. And just as I'm saying we should never take Bukayo Saka for granted, I will never take you guys for granted. That's why I try and reply to every comment, within reason of course, and it's why I think we're building something really special here on my channel. But until next time, in a day or two, I'll catch you in a bit. Thank you very much for watching. See you later.